Here we go. Welcome to Design Approach. Before we get started, I wanted to give Legends Bar and Grill another round of applause. They are quickly becoming my go-to place to record the podcast. The food is great. The beer selection is expansive. They have a bunch of PA microbrews on tap, so check that out. And I feel like it's kind of overlooked because it's in the hotel. So if you live in the area and you're looking for a place to eat, I know me and my family don't normally consider it, but consider Legends next time. I'm telling you, you won't regret it. Also, people have been asking, how do I edit the podcast? Well, I use Adobe Audition. It comes with your Creative Cloud subscription. I Googled some presets. I can put those in the show notes for anyone else that wants to do this. And on a side note, I need some help. Please, if anyone out there is an audio engineer and likes editing, I would love to bring them on. It's taking me a lot longer than I thought to edit each one of these up. I am not an audio engineer, and I don't claim to be one on the internet. So, if you or someone you know is a professional audio engineer out there that loves editing podcasts, have them contact me. I pay a highly competitive rate, and it's just something I would love to offload. Contact me at trevorcalabro@hotmail.com. Before you laugh, I know, Hotmail, I get it, whatever, trevorcalabro@hotmail.com. Thanks, and here we go. This interview with BN takes a lot of twists and turns. I hope everyone enjoys it. He talks about how the journey in life and your career is not linear in any way. We talk a lot about transference of skill sets and ideas. We talk about the true differentiator of a creative person. And then stuff gets real cool. We start talking about the difference between design and art and these large kind of theoretical things that people debate about all the time. I found BN to be extremely thoughtful, very calculated, super smart, and just chock full of valuable information. Without further ado, BN Concepcion. Welcome to Design Approach, the podcast where I talk about how people approach design. Sometimes we have a formal introduction. My guest today wanted to just go freestyle, so I'm pretty happy about that because I like doing that as well. Without further ado, I want to welcome to the podcast, BN Concepcion.
Hello.
So why don't you give everyone kind of a little intro?
Sure.
Or, you know what? First, I want to tell everyone how we met. This podcast is starting to sound like a plug for CP Squared, but it's just where I happen to meet everyone. And I do advocate anyone listening to this that lives in the, Center County, Pennsylvania area that is interested in getting together with a bunch of cool professional creatives to join the club. I love it. It's how I've met all these people. It's been great. But anyway, that's how I met BN.
Yeah, it's a really cool group.
Yeah, it's cool.
It's neat.
You know what it was? I went to one of my first or second CP Squared events, and you were a keynote speaker. There was like a panel of speakers, and you gave a talk about, you answered questions, you talked about your company, and that's how we met. And we talked afterwards a little bit. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. So I run a small web design development company. It's called Concepcion Design LLC.
Cool.
Yeah, it's only a few of us involved. I'm the primary. I had a longstanding developer that actually just recently left about a month ago, and then my wife also is a big part of the business as well. So it's between the two of us, it's we accomplish a whole lot. Plus, as you know, Chris Weaver, who was also on that same web panel, he and I have been doing a lot more work together recently over the past about 2 months probably. The company's been running since 2003. So it's
wow.
Yeah, it's about 14 years old this coming October. It's crazy.
Does that mean you did stuff in Flash at one point?
I did. I did stuff in Flash.
I'm sorry.
It's terrible.
Sorry to hear that.
It's terrible.
I did Flash stuff too.
Yeah, the Flash. God. And it still rears its ugly head every once in a while too. A lot of HTML. A lot of CSS development. Our primary focus right now is WordPress. We see a lot of efficiencies with WordPress. A lot of many ways in which we can do rapid design and development. Always looking for new ways to not just make that process more efficient, but to be able to allocate more time to the design concept, the design aspect of the whole website design and development process, without having without making development take so much extra time. And this works better for people that have smaller budgets. But in addition to that, we do a lot of custom development too. A lot of Drupal, a lot of almost like custom software, but it's all using web-based technologies, right? So that's where a lot of our focus is.
Yeah, that's where at the web panel that you spoke on, you talked about some of those applications that you made that were pretty impressive. So we'll probably get into some of that.
Sure.
So is that the I didn't realize the WordPress thing. I didn't realize that you guys were having a push toward WordPress, but that explains the Chris Weaver.
Yeah. Chris is like a hardcore WordPress enthusiast, and so that works for our business really well. Mainly because I think back in 2013, I realized what we were doing, and which was mostly almost all custom development, was somewhat unsustainable as long term, right? So as we would accrue new clients, we'd create these custom content management systems, which at the time were really, I would say, very reliable and useful. But as WordPress started to become more popular, I saw the appeal in possibly using WordPress as a platform, and therefore, we'd save ourselves time and sweat with building things from scratch when we wouldn't have to build from scratch anymore. But I mean, even in 2013, I think it was still kind of hit or miss. Like, well, is WordPress really going to be the right content management system to use going forward? And I think it was sort of a small bet that I kind of made with myself. Well, let's give it a shot. Let's try to move more of our
one.
Yeah, and I think
that one.
Yeah, exactly. Between that and Drupal, I think Drupal works well in certain environments, depending on the size of the company or the size of the website project that you're building. But WordPress is very, very capable and can do way more than you would expect it to. So
let's put a pin in that differentiation between Drupal and WordPress stuff, just from how you see it and how you deal with it with your company for a second. Just because I got a quick question. I just want to get it out before I forget.
Okay.
So I just made a realization just now. So I've had a couple people on the podcast, Chris Weaver being one, who work very closely with their wives, like in the company, and being a married guy. I'm just curious, how does that, I don't work with my wife, but how does that work? Is there any like, is it amazing? Is it great? Is it weird? Is it?
I guess I'm so used to it. Just
the way it is.
Yeah. I mean, when we're trying to make decisions about like what direction are we going to go as a company, do we hire this person? Do we, some things I don't necessarily take to committee,
Right. Yeah.
But most of our big decisions, I think, are ones that we have to make together. In terms of overall accounting, financial decisions that affect the company. Like, do we buy this equipment?
So you never get sick of each other?
What? No. I mean,
Are you expecting her to listen to this? Is that why? I'm just kidding.
I'm trying to see, like, what can I say that is a little bit more in depth, but doesn't cross the line.
Yeah.
No.
It just seems like everyone I've asked. I asked Brad Grozek that question too, and he was like, "Yeah, it's great. It's great."
Yeah, I mean, she's not. I mean, like, honestly, between for anybody listening, I mean, she's not as involved as I am. I'm very active with the company, but she's also the president of the school board here in State College. So her time is divided up much, very much towards the school board stuff, and it really, her involvement in the company is really more like big picture decision making, that kind of stuff.
Well, that's cool, and that makes
it's
sense.
not like the day to day.
Yeah, well, that would make sense that you would go. It's nice to have that, like, that brain trust and that partner,
Right.
business partner and life partner to just be there for those big kind of decisions. So
Right.
I can imagine the burden of that's pretty rough if you're by yourself. So.
Yeah, because then you feel like you're making all these decisions by yourself, and then you're
they affect your family.
Right.
They affect your wife and kids very immediately. So
Right.
why not have her be directly involved?
Right. Without consultation or without, affirmation that like, is this the right way to go? Is this the right decision to make? And you find yourself making lots of decisions when it's like something as simple as, do I buy this server? This is like a 2-year investment, or do I replace this laptop? Do we gear everyone towards WordPress, for example? I mean, that's a big decision because that affects everything, the way you do business. So it's important. But
I just had to ask because I don't work with my wife.
Okay.
And I never would not. I'm just curious about that kind of stuff because being your own boss and having your own kind of rules and figuring it out on the fly, like a lot of the people I've been talking to have done, like yourself, I would imagine. Sometimes I think people get the look of how it is from the outside, and this is something that I like to do with the podcast, is try to give some people behind the scenes look. So let's talk a little bit about, is it pretty much 2 different tracks specifically? You're going after 2 different, very different clients, or do clients come to you and then you
it happens in a
steer them toward?
It happens in a few different ways. So, one thing I was saying before is that depending on the size of the project, you may want to go Drupal, you may want to go WordPress. Also depends on what kind of customization or what kind of functionality that you're looking to accomplish. The other side of it is that certain organizations like Penn State University, for example, they made a decision 4 years ago that a lot of their development, if not all new development, needs to be in Drupal. And so that's not my decision, right? So I need to work with that and make, if I'm going to work with them on a website, then we need to make it work in Drupal. Right. So and a lot of ways it makes a lot of sense, because a lot of the different departments that I've worked with at Penn State have websites that are 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 pages, and I don't think WordPress is the best solution for that, mainly because of the volume. So that's where I think Drupal really has an edge. The challenge with Drupal, though, is that it's a lot more development heavy, and there are a lot of opportunities for error. Whether or not it's you or the developer that worked on it before you were even involved, which we've seen, unfortunately, more than a few times. And do they do the project correctly? Was it set up correctly? Did they choose the right theme? I mean, there's so many opportunities for error in Drupal, whereas with WordPress, I think it's a little bit different. I mean, you can make some big mistakes setting up a website, but if necessary, you could always rebuild it from scratch in a lot less time. So also in WordPress,
as opposed to Drupal.
Drupal,
you wouldn't be able to just scrap it.
Right.
And I've seen a trend over the last couple of years of really. I've been steeped in UI and UX for about the last 7 years. I'm traditionally a graphic designer, so I really care about like the way things look and feel. But I've seen a real like homogenization of the web over time, and templatization of the web. And at first, I was apprehensive. And almost a little like offended,
right.
But then, of course, over time, I realized how much better it's making the experience. Me personally, I've really embraced WordPress and other kind of technologies like that kind of do a good job of making sure out of the box everything works as expected.
Well, I mean, that's where WordPress really shines too. Yeah. The whole responsive nature of WordPress, when you choose a theme, the theme is expected to be responsive out of the box. You should be able to view something on mobile without having done anything. Right. So the expectation is there that it's already mobile friendly. That's happening with Drupal. That's happened with Drupal, but it's not the same. Like I said, everything requires a lot more TLC. And a lot more a finer attention to detail, because because people, I just feel like the community for Drupal in terms of the design community is way smaller than the design community that contributes to WordPress. And so the quality of the themes that you get that are out of the box, like something you would get out of WordPress, the quality of the themes that come out of the box on Drupal are just not nearly as good. Not unless you spend X number of dollars more on a theme that has all the bells and whistles, but you might as well have gone WordPress. So
you just gave me an idea for my next endeavor. Someone's got to be the UX guru in Drupal land, right?
I know. No, seriously. I mean, it's. I feel like it really needs attention.
Yeah.
I mean, we've worked.
All right, I'll do it. Geez.
We've worked with a number of like Penn State sites, but not just that. I mean, the community market for themes in Drupal is terrible. You know, it's just not. It's not.
Yeah, it's different.
Yeah, it's different, right? And maybe people have very different expectations, but you know, having spent enough time on websites like ThemeForest, where you know sure, there's a lot of garbage out there, but there are a few that are like really well done and really well maintained. I guess my standard is higher. When I'm going to get something from Drupal that
you and the world, the community, people on the internet.
Yeah,
there's no room anymore. This is part of my point about the homogenization. There's no room anymore for broken stuff,
right?
You know, unless you're consciously doing it. If your website isn't meant to really have someone do something,
right?
You know, if part of the shtick is like doing it in a weird way, then get weird. That's fine, but.
Right.
You know, otherwise it's a bug.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly. And I think, depending, we have two very different types of clients. We have clients that really, really need to get their information out there in a very straightforward way. So they're not as obsessed with the overall design of it. They want it to look like.
What would that kind of customer look like? Small business?
A lot of small business, right? A lot of small business where, maybe they're a startup, maybe they have an idea that just needs a lot more fleshing out from the branding perspective,
right.
But they don't need something that's absolutely crazy and over the top. So those that type of client is gonna want something that works, right?
Yeah.
That follows a very straightforward template, but is a good way for them to organize their content and get it out there so that people can see it. Whereas, the client that really needs more functionality is going to want to go with Drupal, like custom functionality, almost like completely custom programming, really. Maybe they need some sort of like staff directory that does this, and this, that you just can't do it in WordPress, at least not with the available software that's out there.
And most of the Drupal projects you work on, correct me if I'm wrong, are like internal stuff too, right?
Some of it's pretty internal. A lot of it, I mean, with Penn State, a lot of it's external. Like Penn State Sustainability Institute, the Penn State Law School. We've done a few for the Center for Dirt and Gravel Road Studies. There's a project out of the Department of Engineering and Sciences that's called the Pulse of the Earth project, which follows the movement of tectonic plates all across the world. Cool. It's a front-facing website that presents some of the research that they're doing, but not some internal stuff. Some stuff that I don't think I'm at liberty to talk about.
Right, because it's internal.
Right, exactly.
Hence the nature of it.
Right.
Well, it's interesting. I didn't realize that you were that you had the whole WordPress thing going, but it's so, it's probably pretty easy when someone walks in the door, or do you ever run into those cases where you're like, you know what? Do you ever have someone come to you for something custom and you're like, really what you need is something more standard out of the box?
Yeah.
Or is it the other way around, maybe?
I think we, especially in the past year, we've probably seen a lot of instances in which people think they need something really custom, but we're able to put together a technology stack within WordPress that does exactly what what they need, right? So, for example, we're hopefully next week we're launching a website for a new client that offers weekend getaways for a yoga group, right? So, say for example, you go to a yoga studio. I don't know if Chris talked to you about this.
He did.
If you go to a yoga studio and this instructor really wants to set up a 3-day trip to Bermuda, this company is doing all the heavy lifting in terms of developing the itinerary, helping you book the hotels,
So cool.
getting the flights, etc. But the website needs to function in a way that you can put it. Me as like a yoga member, or like a studio member wants to go on this trip, I got to put down a $500 deposit, and at some point later on, once they know the trip is a go, I have to pay the remaining balance, etc. So all of this stuff, which seems like it would be a custom thing, is all done using the right combination of WordPress plugins. Some of them paid, like this deposit functionality is a WooCommerce product that you pay money for, but I feel comfortable in the fact that it's an actively developed product. Yeah. They're trying to make it better. So hopefully over time, as this deposit plugin gets better, then I'm going to have more functionality available to me. But basically everything that they were looking to create was going to be doable within WordPress in some shape or form. So,
and that's another great thing about the WordPress kind of like ecosystem, right? Is that it certainly will get better.
Yeah.
And if it's like anything else, and if WordPress continues to be one of these go-to, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but like go-to
platform,
then the development community and the plugins available will just get better and better.
Right.
So we talked about how you segment the different kinds of clients and different work you do. Mm-hmm. Can we go backwards a little bit and talk about how you came to start the company, why you started your own company, and kind of what you did before?
That's a great question. So I was working, I was living in DC. I was working for a small company that was doing a television show that, in retrospect, sort of sharked businesses into paying them money to be on television, basically. It was called Business Now.
I think I'm familiar with this. Is this specifically a DC thing?
It was a DC thing,
okay.
Yeah. And
I feel like I know this.
And so this company would go out, they'd like do kind of like a company profile, a business profile on this company, and their big target was companies that maybe just got on the stock market, right? That just had an IPO. Yeah. So they were like ripe for marketing, some PR, and so this company would go out, do a business profile on them and put them on this half-hour television show. This was my first job out of college, and I quickly found myself doing everything, right? So after graduating from college, I came in as an entry-level editor, like editing the TV show. But like quickly within the first week, everybody around me was fired, and I was then all of a sudden the main editor of the show.
Was it because there was like high turnover, or was it because?
No, I don't think so. I think it's I think it was just overall poor management at the top level. There were a few different people that were the big decision makers, and I think people that were editing the show prior to me were not good editors. I'd done that job for about a year and a half, and even then saw more people come in, and I would work with them, and I'd get close with them, and then they would get fired, and then I would be back by myself again. And we were working out of an incubator building. By the time I got married, went on my honeymoon, and came back, the company was far behind in rent payments at the office, and I was gone maybe a week and a half for my honeymoon.
Like
and by the time I came back from my honeymoon, we were in my boss's basement. And I realized this is not working out for me, and I started looking for other jobs, but I didn't really know anybody, and so the only folks I knew were the people that I would deliver tapes to be handed over to major networks that were broadcasting the show. When I found out my wife was pregnant, I realized that this was not the this was not happening. This was not the way for me to continue to work. And so, I put my resignation in, not knowing what the heck I was going to do.
Straight up,
knowing that I really needed to do anything else.
Yeah.
And so I went to this one company that I deliver tapes to. And I told the manager there that, believe it or not, this will be probably the last time you see me. I'm leaving, but I'll probably pick up the tape at some point, right? And the guy says, well, you're an editor, right? I said, yeah. He said, well, we have this show for Discovery Channel that, and we need an editor. Do you want to take it on? And I said, absolutely. So overnight I became a freelance editor, left my job 2 weeks later, started that following Monday, making
Nice.
three times the amount of money that I made in my previous job. And that's what started my freelance career. But then basically I did that for a number of years, and grew my freelance portfolio.
It's like the shortest interview ever. You just want to work here
Yeah.
for us? Yes. Okay.
And it worked out.
Yeah.
It worked out. I mean, and I have to say, I was lucky. I was given a chance because I fell into it.
Did he see your work that you handed, or
No.
did you literally just hand him the
Did
tape?
not see. I handed him a tape of the show,
Right.
which I wouldn't count as like my best work.
Right.
It was just the way that show was done.
I'm just interested if it was like, was it good work that influenced that, or was it more just the connection of knowing a person and they needed a person? It was just timing.
That's a really good question. I don't know if it was, maybe they saw the way the show was being done, maybe they liked it and they thought, oh, maybe this guy's actually a pretty good editor.
Because everyone knows that editing is like,
Yeah.
it's a big deal.
Yeah,
You're telling the story, it's like everyone's getting fired around you.
Right.
Which implies that you're doing something that you weren't getting fired for.
I wish I knew the answer to that, or maybe it was a little bit of backstory. I interviewed for an assistant project manager to sit a job like before I finally quit at that company, and maybe that interview, even though I didn't, they offered me way too little, it was like an intern level salary, and I realized, wait a second, I can't do that because my wife just said she was pregnant. I need a real job.
Yeah.
So they offered me like a really low salary, and I said I couldn't take it, and I ended up turning that down. And then it was maybe some months later where I went back and I said, hey, listen, I'm leaving my job, and then that's when they offered me this freelance position.
I think it's
I think they
notable.
just took a chance on me, which was, to be honest with you, was like a total godsend, because that's what really launched my career in editing. Anyway, this had nothing to do with website design and development. Let's fast forward 4 years later. I was just telling you just now, I was working on a project for National Geographic. It was a prison show for National Geographic Explorer.
What show was it?
It was Explorer.
Okay.
Their flagship show is called Explorer. Even before they had a network, they had National
I'm trying to
Geographic
think if I've
Explorer.
seen it. I'm just like trying.
Well, I think it's still on Netflix. So, but it was a prison show. It was a great project, but it was totally draining. It was a 3-month project. I would get there at 8 a.m. I'd work with a producer. They'd feed me lunch so I wouldn't leave, and then they'd feed me dinner so I wouldn't leave.
Right.
And I probably wouldn't go home until about 2 a.m.
Right.
And then
Jeez.
and then I'd have to be back at 8 a.m. And it was like a 7-day-a-week job. We couldn't move deadlines. And while I thought it was a really great experience, and I felt really good with my performance, right? Like I felt like I was working hard, and I was doing a really good job, and I felt like I was developing a lot of talent. It was eating me alive. I didn't.
How long did you do that for?
That particular project was only about 3 or 4 months, and for an hour-long show. But I got to this point where I was not seeing my son, who was like a year old. Like I didn't see him at all. And anytime I came home, it would break my heart, right? Because because I wouldn't be able to spend time with them, and then I'd have to go right back. And it brought me to the realization that this is not a way for me to live. And so, after long talks with my wife, we decided that we would try to move out. For a short period of time, I secured a job as a web developer for a company based out of DC. But I would work remotely in State College.
What web experience did you have?
A fair amount. Actually, so I started doing website design and development, or at least tinkering with it, when I was in high school. At the same time, I started to learn
how to... So this was just a side interest that...
It was a side interest.
Yeah. Or was editing a side interest?
No, editing was my passion.
Okay.
I went to school for film and video, and my goal was to become a film director, in Hollywood, and that quickly changed when when life started to really happen.
Yeah.
So that was my base, and all in the meantime, throughout my time being an editor, I was always interested in website design and development, and my cousin and I started a business doing a news website that was focused on German cars, and that really got me into pursuing more website development going forward. And so all throughout this time that I lived in DC, I would do some small website projects here and there. But when we decided to move to State College, there's no television here. At least unless you're working for WPSU,
right.
There's nothing out here in terms of video production. And so, or at least there wasn't when I first moved here. And so, my big fallback was website design and development. And so, before moving out, like I said, I secured a small job with a company that was based out of DC. That was a production company, but I convinced them to give me a website design and development job because that's where things were going.
Right. Yeah.
And was able to do that I had the freedom to pursue my own work. So when we moved here, I started to build out our business, and when that production company folded, I was already on a good footing. So we were able to survive from there. So that's cool. That's how we came to State College. That's how we.
Well, there's a lot of like wisdom in that story. I kind of want to backtrack a little and unpack some of that, because I think some of the younger listeners might find this valuable information. Like I found a lot of parallels with your story, with my own story too, and I'm trying to think maybe it's not just a coincidence. Maybe this is something that, like for instance, my very first job out of college, like yours, was terrible. It was very hard. It was very low pay. I did things like, didn't you say you ended up, I'm trying to remember, you said you ended up in your boss's house or something?
Yeah, basement.
Yeah, I remember I was like feeding the boss's dog on the weekends and stuff, like weird stuff that doesn't happen in legitimate companies.
Yeah.
But that's what happens. I value that experience to this day, and it led me to, I needed that stepping stone.
And it teaches you how to survive in a lot of ways.
Right. So I think if anyone out there that's listening is in the beginning parts of their career and they end up in a situation just like we were, I think the point I'm getting at, I think a lot of people might. I'm glad for that experience. It did suck, but it was also great.
Yeah.
It was weird, but it also had real world experience in it. And I think sometimes you have to kind of kiss some frogs to get to that place.
Sure.
So that was the first point. I was trying to make mental notes as you were telling that story. It was a good story. It was a good just to hear people unpack their own migration through life is hilarious. The other point I think that's valuable is this idea of transference. I've found a pattern out of all the people I've been interviewing, including in my own life too, that it's not like, so you went to school for film and you then did a lot of editing and then it transitioned into a web thing. But there's and I found this with every single person I've talked to so far, is that of course we're all multifaceted, and especially kind of high achievers are multifaceted. I think one of the things you can do is have the ability to transfer skills across any of the idioms.
Right.
So I'm sure your editing experience and passion influences and informs the way you do website.
Well, I guess the biggest skill that transferred over was my attention to visual detail. What I'm doing right now, or what we're doing, is web design and development. But I could be doing something almost entirely different. But what it comes down to is my ability to communicate with people, and and be able to.
So that's your key.
That's what I think is my
your key strength.
That's what I think is my key strength. I feel like after all these years, especially going back to being an editor, right, where I had to like negotiate for the rate, where and being a small business owner or being a freelancer, you're always in an interview. Right, you're always, not to say that you're trying to sell yourself, but it's almost like being in a job interview every month out of the year, because you are trying to present yourself as the person that can do this particular task or this job. And
not to mention the act of editing itself.
Right, exactly. And then the ability to also perform in that job, right? So to be transparent with what you're doing, and I feel like that's what in our case, as we do things currently, like just being able to actively communicate with the client and be able to say, okay, well, here's where we are. This is what we're doing. Here are our visuals. I want to get feedback from you and see what you think, and let's have a conversation about it, because I want to make sure that we're hitting all the points that you want us to hit when we're creating a design or hitting development. And I think that just that simple task of being in constant communication with the client is what gives us the ability to make sure we're producing a good product, right? And that goes back to when I was editing, where I'm sitting there with the producer and, hey, can you take a look at this? What do you want to change? And do you want me to try something different where, that could be a little bit more creative, but a little more risky, but also create a nice moment. So it's things like that where it's the communication, the constant feedback, and not to be overbearing, but to demonstrate a certain level of confidence that, okay, I know what I'm doing, and I can, let me try this. What do you think? And I think that creates an atmosphere of like, this guy's really good to work with, or we can, I could see using you in more projects in the future. So
it's interesting how you frame that, because I was convinced I knew where you were going with that. I thought you were going to say the skills I learned while I edited, because the idea of editing is you take a bunch of footage and then you make a narrative. You help to create and enhance the narrative.
Absolutely, and there's an art to that. There's absolute art to that.
I was convinced you were going to tell about the skills I use to create those narratives are the same skills I use today when I'm building a web experience. But in fact, this is so interesting, and it's so true. I've started to learn this too as I get older and like more established in my career, is that no, the real value was the interpersonal relationships you had from client to whatever, all the stuff you just talked about. How it's not like you excluded the work from your explanation, but the journey of the work was equally important, if not more so, than the work in and of itself.
Oh, I would definitely agree. I mean, I think the work in itself, I mean, I take pride in the work that I did as an editor. I don't mean to downplay that. I'm talking about like how I got from A to B. I mean, the work is also a big factor in how I got from like this one job to Discovery Channel to the PBS, and then BBC America, and then finally Nat Geo before I decided I was done. And so that was my work that helped me get there, but it was also my ability to communicate with people, and I think that's a really important factor in being able to survive in this world where you don't know where the next project is coming from.
Right.
And I think that's a critical skill for somebody that wants to be self-employed or that wants to run their own business, because like I was saying, you're in a job interview every single time you meet with a client to like talk about a proposal, or you're just interested in a project that they need a developer for, or they need a designer for, you got to put yourself out there and say, well, I know we can do it this way, this way, this way, and this way. But that level of confidence really only comes from all these years of just basic personal communication.
Right. Yeah.
So
and I think it's almost a side effect of I have this theory I'm working on. It's half baked, but
Okay.
I believe that before you get to that 10,000 hour mark in mastery of your craft, it's all about the stuff you do. I remember in my early to like mid career, 5 years in, I was really trying to prove myself very hard, and I was very intensely learning things. Not that I've stopped learning things. In fact, now learning things, I have more joy to it.
Right.
Back then, it was more survival. I felt like I needed to not just learn, but exhibit the newness of what I've learned.
Yeah.
And then you reach a point, and full disclosure, Bien and I are about the same age, so we talked about this earlier. I feel like I'm just hitting that point where it's not about the work anymore. Now it's about the ability to communicate the work as well as communicate just value in general.
Right.
And then my guess is, and then further along in the career, I'd say we're probably at our mid stride of our careers now. When you hit the end of your career, it's probably about giving back, mentoring, those kind of things. I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Yeah,
That's
I'm hoping that
not that we couldn't give back now, or not that a new person in any field couldn't give back. I mean, I think giving back is. I just mean the focus. So I still learn, even though my focus was about learning in the beginning, in the early stages.
Right, but
I'm still progressing.
I agree with you. I mean, I feel like even now, I'm still learning so many things. I'm seeing a lot of exciting opportunities, especially with WordPress. I mean, I think that's cool. I think it's getting better, and I think that I'm always trying to be aware of new technologies that are coming out. I've been burned before. We've started to get into Angular, and now like people are walking away from Angular and moving on to React. I'm like, come on, And every time I put time into a new platform, it's tough. You're hoping that it's going to be the right one, but like this world is changing, and sure, Angular is good now, but then React is really good tomorrow. But then what comes after React? There's going to be something else, and it's only going to be a year from now when that happens. So, survival is like a really important part, and I don't want to stop learning. I want to be able to know that I could be on top of certain technologies, so that when it's time to adapt, and it's going to be time to adapt soon, right? WordPress is probably not going to be forever. Drupal is not going to be forever. Right. There's going to be a time in which we have to say, listen, we need to shift our focus, and this is for survival.
It's true, especially in tech.
Yeah.
But I think it's true in everything. I'm learning that more and more. Like the ability to transfer skills, or the ability to easily adapt to new environments, new technologies, new methodologies, is so much more valuable than the being an expert in the technology itself. Right. Not that expertise is not great, but I also believe that if you have expertise in any one given technology, then you can be automated. At the end of the day, someone's got to program the AI, right? So like I'd rather be programming it than be obsoleted by it.
Right. It's either that, or you're going to find a college student that can do exactly the same things that we're doing.
Right. This is the homogenization thing, right? Like there are people that have a background like I do, that are really upset that the web has been homogenized, and are still trying to get gigs, custom
doing
designing,
something unique.
Doing unique web stuff.
And there is still a market for that. And
don't get me wrong, but that's a boutique novelty.
It is a boutique, and the longevity that goes along with that is very short.
You better be good if you're that.
Right. I recently did a website for a colleague of mine that was a film producer or a video producer, and I was pulling up examples of what we could do that's really cool and really neat. And I found this one website that's just beautiful, fantastic, and it has like really nice a really nice reel that goes in the background of the homepage, and has this really cool animation that comes on top of it. But I'm like, wait a second. You know how hard it is to maintain that?
Yeah.
And in a year, it's going to be stale and outdated, and they're going to need to think about something else that's going to need to replace it. That's the risk. I mean, nobody's going to care in 10 years whether or not I was a good WordPress developer.
Right,
you know?
right.
They're going to care whether or not I was able to put together a solution that worked for that business,
right,
and help them grow and help them succeed. So
that's a truism. I found that to be true across the board.
Yeah,
it is. The value you bring to the table is not limited to the technologies.
Right.
In fact, it's in spite of the technologies.
Right. I mean, right now we are definitely enjoying our time doing WordPress, but you have to be aware, like in Drupal and like I said, some level of custom programming, but we have to be aware that in the future, this may not be the platform we're working on. 8 years ago, we were doing all of our work in Cold Fusion, which almost doesn't exist now.
Yeah.
And
back to the very beginning of the podcast, remember we talked about Flash.
Yeah.
There were companies that went out of business because
all they did was Flash.
Because they doubled down on Flash.
Yeah.
It's this idea that the technology is what drove their business or their ability to contribute to other people's to another company or another person's vision. Right. And when you limit yourself to the technology, you're susceptible to that technology.
Right.
So, yeah, I think being agile is just inherently
right. That's not to say that you can't not be an expert. I mean, you have to really understand the technology, really understand what it's capable of, and use it as well as you possibly can. But at some point, you're going to have to realize, even though you spent all this time on those skills, they may not be applicable later in life, and so like it goes down to Flash. Like, who cares if I knew how to edit the keyframes and put the sprite right here and then move it with
did you ever code
an equation?
ActionScript 2.0? You do ActionScript 2?
I tried, and then I realized this was too much for me.
ActionScript 3 was like a legit language that had some transference. ActionScript 1 and 2, it was like, ugh.
Well, I say we joke about things like ActionScript, but the one thing that's really stayed for as long as it has is JavaScript.
Yeah, of course.
And I mean, we're talking 15 years in, JavaScript hasn't changed a whole lot. It's gotten better in the sense that people have developed things like jQuery and Angular to go on top of it. But the base of JavaScript has not really changed, and I'm not hedging my bets on JavaScript, but at least there has been some level of consistency.
The longer it's around, the longer it's likely to be around.
Right. HTML will be with us for a little while.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting. It really is kind of going back to the transference thing. This is what I'm thinking about: is how to you take what you learned with this experience and transfer that to that overall. I keep talking about the 10,000 hours. That mark of mastery. I guess the question is, what are you mastering? And if your goal is to master ActionScript, that's probably a bad goal, right?
Right.
And you could apply that to anything. You can apply that to the most. I want to master. Insert the hottest. The hottest tech right now. Yeah. But that's a bad idea.
I know. I mean, it's tough because you say I want to master ActionScript, and it makes you want to laugh, cringe, right? Literally. But then I feel like as far as
people did that, and now we're doing obviously something else. But
even though I work with other people, my personal mastery is currently in JavaScript. or like in WordPress development or Drupal development, and or still Cold Fusion, which I feel like
Right.
it's, even though that language is totally dead, I love it.
Yeah, you still got
and I still feel like I can do anything with it. but where's that going to take you if you can't transfer that somewhere else?
Exactly.
And that goes back to my editing days where, I felt like I became a really good editor. And I still love editing. I mean, even though I haven't touched it in a long time, I did something for the school district a couple of years ago when they were pitching the high school project. I did a series of videos, and it was my first journey back into editing and producing ever since I left DC, and I was like really nervous about it. Wasn't sure if I wanted to get involved in it. And then once I got involved in these projects, we did like 3 or 4 different videos. I felt like the artist in me came back, and I loved it. But then I realized, wait, I'm being too much of a perfectionist. I could do this until the cows come home, and this is all volunteer work. I'm gonna make us bankrupt if we but this, those,
I have so many similar experiences.
Like those visual skills came back, and then but they also transferred back into web design. So when I left editing, the visual skills, like I initially pushed myself out there as a designer, like that's what my real skill was. But then over time it became a combination of design and development, and but still, like the attention to detail is what really kept me alive, as I transitioned out of one industry and into another.
Yeah, it's a great differentiator.
Yeah.
In detail. That's where people lose it. That's the difference. I think 0 to 50, 0 to 80 is easy. Maybe not easy. 0 to 50 is easy. 50 to 80 is a little hard. But 80 to 100 is real tough. And especially 95 to 100. That's where you differentiate. Most people bail at 95 because why even do it when it's not even valued? And the difference is, it is valued, and it's valued over time. This is another theory I have. It's like the long term gain. You can't monetize that last 5% today, but 10 years from now, when you're the go-to, because you've consistently gone 100%, mm-hmm. I think it pays back fold, like in dividends. So.
I would hope so.
But if not, then you just do a bunch of cool stuff for no reason. And what at the end of the day, is that bad?
No. I mean, I love tinkering with new technologies.
Yeah,
but yeah,
I have so many experiences like yours where I literally had to just say to myself, stop. Stop.
Stop. This is fun, but you got to stop because it's not productive.
Yes, yeah. The best example is someone sent me a t-shirt design that they wanted me to emulate with their own whatever. It was like a Batman logo.
Okay.
It was like whatever. So there was a really easy way to do it, and then there was the legit way to do it.
Right.
And what it was the Batman logo in 3D it was on a t-shirt. It was a black t-shirt with very thin yellow stripes that bowed along the contours of the Batman logo.
All right. I can already see it.
Right. And there's a really easy way to do that. You could just, go into Illustrator, make a bunch of lines,
and then
put the logo on top,
right.
put a node at every intersection point, and then just nudge it up 2 pixels and over 2 pixels. Effect. And that would create a very amateurish but legitimate effect.
Sure.
Instead, I rendered the thing in 3D. I just went nuts. I spent like half a day on it. And at the end of the day...
You did it the right way.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it was marginally better. Like barely better. Like, it was better. It was definitely better. But it was like barely better than the easy thing.
Yeah,
but you know what? It was fun, and I did it.
We'll have to talk about perfectionism and how that can make or break you.
Yeah. So did you have any thoughts on perfectionism?
Thoughts on perfectionism? I think it can eat you alive.
Yeah.
I've learned
it's so hard, right? Because it's the differentiator, but it's also
growing up. I was a total perfectionist. Yeah, when I was 16, I remember I was doing a video project for a school project, and we did a lightsaber scene fight, like a lightsaber fight. And this is back in the day when Adobe After Effects didn't even exist.
Yeah.
So what I was doing was I was taking video that we shot, I was exporting every single frame, and I was opening it in Photoshop and then creating a lightsaber for every single frame. And it took forever.
Yeah.
And with each frame, I realized I was spending way too much time. I was like doing the little curve around the edges and then perfecting the glow, and it was taking forever. and I realized, wait a second,
Each frame
I actually
goes by
need
like
to
that?
right, exactly. And I realized I need to not spend so much time on every individual frame. I need to go through them a little bit quicker, and I need to just settle with the fact that it's not going to be absolutely perfect. It's going to be just under perfect, but I will complete the project on time and get things, and I think people will not see the difference. And I think taking that into the future, I continued to be a perfectionist, but then I realized, wait, I need to make some compromises, because if you don't stop at some point, the project will never end. And so, so I don't know.
To clarify, when I said 95 to 100,
right,
I didn't necessarily mean 100 being the literal personification of perfection,
right?
Because I've been there too.
Yeah.
And, when I was real little, I had GI Joes. If you ever look at the bottom of the foot of GI Joes, they had a hole in the foot,
mm-hmm.
and the reason why was I also had some of the environments you could buy. I forget what they're called, but like there was one that was like a
right, and you could stick the
you could, and that's all I did. And I didn't realize I was I have one sibling. He's much. There's a big age gap. He's much younger than me. We're like 9 years apart or something. So I was pretty much an only child up to the age of 9. I was an only child. And this is what I did. I thought was normal until I invited friends over, and I realized what they did with GI Joes was smash their heads together and fight with them and do action. What I would do is just set them up in these intricate scenes, and that was it. And just leave it. And in fact, I had a really bad temper when I was younger. I think it was due to the perfectionism. I would get like viscerally, I'd have visceral reaction if someone touched the things.
Right. You'd be very emotionally attached to the setup.
I got to move this, and you put it on the dinner table. And I was like, if one gun holster off of GI Joe moves a centimeter, I will be very upset.
Yeah.
And then that persisted as I aged, and it became more and more problematic. So I can totally relate to the fact that there's a difference between minimal viable, which I think is understandably a term that's very economical,
mm-hmm.
But is also the death of innovation,
Right.
So there's a fine line between total perfection and that baseline.
Mm-hmm.
Does it work? Okay, move on. There's.
Right.
I think in between is a nice sweet spot.
Yeah, you have to.
You can really.
You got to do more than the minimum.
Yeah.
But
minimal viable gives me the heebie-jeebies.
Right. No.
That means we literally did the least amount of work possible for you to pay us.
Right.
Or for the user to use it.
And
it's not sustainable. It's a good short-term goal.
It's not sustainable, and I think that anybody that's doing this kind of work is going to realize that that's not going to get you very far.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you don't put in the extra mile to make it a good product, to make it to make it worth your while, then that will show later on in life. So I think that's. But anyway, my argument is against towards being a total perfectionist, where it's the extreme end of that spectrum. And for folks like us, I think it's easy to fall into that trap where you want it to be perfect. But at some point there's a there's a moment in which if you don't stop doing that, there's no more benefit. After a certain point, there's no more benefit in continuing to tweak it till the cows come home. And that's a risk that anybody takes. But there's also the opposite risk, which is simply not doing enough to make it good.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a balancing act there.
Yeah.
I think if you consistently overshoot within reason, that's kind of a good rule of thumb.
Yeah.
You can't delay. Minimal viable never delights anyone.
Right.
And delight is what is a good. It's a good future goal. It's a good sustainable model. Minimal viable is not sustainable. It's very good short term.
I think minimal viable. I think like mowing my lawn.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, that's how I mow my lawn.
Right. I'm gonna mow my lawn to the minimal viable level.
Yeah, there's some people that max out their lawn though. I got a guy in my neighborhood who's like, his lawn is pristine.
Right.
And it's impressive. And to your point, our lawns don't look that different. Right? I barely do what is socially acceptable, and this guy kills himself, and there's marginal difference.
Right.
But to him, that marginal difference is all the difference.
Yeah.
And that's the perfectionism. I think maybe a perfect scenario would be a client that required perfectionism as I defined it.
Right.
And indulge that, I mean, that's the difference between art and design, really.
Right.
Now we're getting in the realm of art.
Right.
So that would be
right. That's what I was going to say. I mean, because at some point you are then just considered an artist, and while that has a lot of weight to it, there are also some risks that come along with that.
Oh yeah.
And being seen incorrectly as somebody that's an artist that may be just for lack of a better word, too much of a perfectionist, where it consumes you. And so
this is kind of a cool segue, because I want to get your take on this.
Okay.
Art versus design. I'm just not an artist. I have a degree in art. My degree's in fine art, but I was never the person that could sit down and paint their feelings, or in fact, I would assign myself criteria for my fine arts projects simply to get them done.
Right.
I need parameters, and I think pretty much the second you start to build parameters, it's going away from art and toward design.
Sure, of course.
And I mean, one of the most basic definitions of design versus art is like design needs to work or function or have fulfill a task.
For me, the art is in the process, right? When I am in the middle of, I'm gonna find it hard to explain the idea of parameters being a component in what I consider to be art, right? So, for example, I'm working with a client, and they want something that's a good design, but it's got to have this, and this. And for me, what becomes really good art for me is being able to execute within those parameters, but something that looks and feels great. So in some way, I don't identify with the idea of no parameters.
Right. Yeah.
I think that in many ways, I don't think that really computes. Not for me. Like, for example, the side hobby thing is I like to do a little bit of building with wood, right? So I built a couple of years ago. I built a chair, like a lounge chair for my front porch. Kind of silly to think that that's something that I would consider art, but it's for me, I enjoy the process of creating that chair. It's a little bit different than what would be a normal chair, but it still meets some basic parameters. You can sit on it.
Yeah.
It has some armrests, so you can rest your arms, and then along with it comes some function. I built a little footrest that depending on how you angle the footrest can either be good for putting your feet on so that you can have a laptop, or you can turn it around and you can just put your feet on and just lounge. and in which that has less function, like a less of a functional purpose, right? But for me, the enjoyment that I get out of that whole process was simply the building part, or the designing and building of it, where I don't even sit on it very much. Mainly because I don't know about you, but like, because we live such busy lives, I don't find myself ever really sitting down and just chilling out. So I built this chair.
I'm uncomfortable with leisure time.
Yeah, I built this chair, but I don't really sit on it a lot. because I built a chair that was meant for lounging, and I don't lounge.
You like the idea of lounging.
Right, I like the idea of lounging. But anyway, it comes back down to what do I consider art? For me, I guess art in many ways is the satisfaction of something, right? And so what I enjoy most is producing something that I feel serves a purpose, right? So whether or not it's the chair, or if it's like a website design, or in a lot of my experience is actually coding something, right? When I'm creating a tool or some sort of programming that executes a function that serves the purpose that meets the parameters that I'm given, right? So maybe it has to do X, Y, and Z, and if I do it and I do it the right way and it functions and it works correctly, for me, that's where the enjoyment comes.
Right.
And that's what gives me the satisfaction. And for me, what defines good art is something that satisfies me, so if I enjoy that process and I'm satisfied, I feel like that's the art. The art is in the process of doing that. And same thing when I'm, if I was constructing a video clip, or if I was putting together like a segment for a film or a documentary. It's the same thing. Like, does it flow right? Does it work? Does it create emotion? And if it works for me, that's what makes the art. And so I don't know. That's at least that's my take on it.
I like how you framed that. I think I might start thinking of it a little. My original question was like, how do you define the difference between art? When does a thing verge into design versus art? And
right. So I totally didn't hit your question.
No, I love your answer. I think I'm going to adopt it. I think I'm going to steal it. It's great. It's like there's literally art in everything, and that's in the process.
Right.
And if you want to boil down the deliverable to art, that's a different story. But
right.
You can find the art within anything.
Right.
I mean, the way you described it, you can find art in.
You can find art
cooking burgers.
You can find art in mowing the lawn.
Mowing the lawn, yeah.
Yeah. I do sometimes, so I was
going to say, it'll never happen for me.
A lot of the time, I do the minimum viable. But
I love that you picked that thing, by the way, because that's my least favorite activity in my life. I hate it.
But sometimes I will take a lot of care into the way I mow the lawn.
That's why
it's not a perfectionist thing. It's just that some days I'm in a rush. I got to just get it done. Other days, let's do this nice,
Yeah.
And that's where I get enjoyment. I get enjoyment out of the process. I think in the future, I'd like to pursue some ideas outside of the general base of website design and development. A friend of mine and I have had this idea for a long time to create a website, but it's more of like a business in which we work with local coffee roasters all across the country. So say, for example, like a nearby roaster would be Rothrock Coffee, for example, that we take this like Woot idea where you promote one thing a day, or in our case, it would be once per week, where we reach out to a company like Rothrock and say, hey, if you have 500 extra bags that you'd like to sell, or are able to produce 500 extra bags of coffee, coffee beans that you'd like to sell, we would like to get you out there, right? So we would sell your product only, like your coffee beans only, for a whole week straight, from Monday morning at 8 a.m. to Sunday at 5 p.m. And then next week it could be a roaster from Seattle, or it could be the week after that it could be a roaster from from Los Angeles or Memphis, for example. But basically the idea would be to work with roasters that either have like a coffee shop of their own or do a lot of roasting for other for coffee shops that really take pride in their work, and get them out there and be able to to sell to a national level, in the same way that Woot does for like an individual product, which Woot doesn't even do anymore because they've sold out.
The best website ever.
It was
the funniest like reviews and.
The people that created Woot created something, because Woot got so big, they created something called Meh, which is MEH. And they still do the same thing. It's like one product a day. In our case, it would be one set of beans per week from a roaster. Gives us the opportunity to talk about what they do and their work and their community and who they serve, but also provide an outlet for people that are all around the world or all around the country to buy those beans, right? So ultimately what it comes down to is someone like me who I might have a subscription to this website. It's called JavaMe. If I have a subscription to the website, I get the benefit of having a new type of bean every week if I wanted to. I mean, or like even once a month, maybe.
Authentic. This is for like people that are into coffee.
Yeah, for people that are really into coffee, because I'm really into coffee.
Yeah, I was gonna say like, what my guess is you have an interest in this.
I do. I mean, I like to I like to try different coffee beans from all over the place. I was in Columbus a couple months ago, and the first place I looked to go to get a snack was to go to like a local roaster or a local coffee shop, because I like that atmosphere. I love the smell of roasted coffee beans. That feels like home to me.
I dabble in some coffees. Like we only grind beans fresh now. We don't do the grind, but
we've got a grinder.
We're just getting there. We got a grinder. We're just starting out. But that sounds cool.
Yeah. So hopefully sometime later this year, we'll be putting something together that gets that started. I think the biggest challenge is getting the lineup right. I'm talking to different roasters, making sure we have the commitment to develop or to produce X number of bags per week, and in the beginning it's obviously going to be a little bit smaller. So to get those initial groups of people that are willing to maybe I'm only producing 100 bags. That's okay, but hey, I'll do it anyway because it could be a fun experience.
Well, this goes back to your interpersonal skills and all the things you learn throughout your career.
Right, because it's not necessarily
so how do you do this? Like you're cold calling places that you research, or?
In some ways, yeah. I mean, I might initially talk to folks that places like the Lamont Cafe, for example, or I might actually do some traveling and go to places where I know serve really good coffee and maybe just kind of talk to them out of the blue and say, hey.
What are your local recommendations?
I think Rothrock would be one, and as far as some other places go, Lamont Cafe actually.
I live like right there. That's where
my office used to be in that building.
Oh, cool.
Actually, and that's sort of what. This is not originally my idea, but what really helped me own the idea was being in the Lamont house. And because the first couple of years after we moved out of my living room, we were working out of the Lamont house, and I
smelling the coffee all day. Every day.
It was awesome. Okay. It was great.
I get the backstory. This is how you became a coffee nut.
Yeah, I mean, I've always liked coffee ever since graduating college, but yeah, I think I became much more of a coffee enthusiast after being in the Lamont house and having their coffee, because they work with a guy that does a lot of roasting, my lead developer who recently left got really into roasting coffee in his basement.
Nice.
And so he does a little bit of that on the side too. So we shared a common like.
I'll have to pick your brain about. I want to up my coffee game. I'm at that point where
I won't brag about being a real coffee expert. I know I have friends that question whether or not I'm addicted to coffee, but I can go like 3 or 4 days without coffee, and I'm perfectly fine.
You sound like an addict. I mean.
I do. And me, the fact that I'm defending myself doesn't support that.
I've gone 3 full days. No coffee.
The fact that I'm defending myself doesn't support that at all. So
I've got these like quick fire questions.
Okay.
So the questions are quick. Your answers absolutely can go on. It doesn't matter. Okay. So what books have had the biggest impact on you?
What books have had the biggest impact on me? I'm going to lean towards fiction. I think The Fellowship of the Ring is probably still one of my favorite books. Digging back into earlier years, I would say Night by Elie Wiesel. There's some short stories that really that have been long lasting. Like I think all my favorite stuff comes from high school, like Catcher in the Rye.
Yeah. Did you ever reread that stuff?
No, I haven't reread Catcher in the Rye, but I did reread The Little Prince to my kids.
Nice.
And I think it's still a great book, even though it's like meant for kids. There's so much meaning in that. And then some shorter stories, Flowers for Algernon, which is I'm a bit farther removed from it, but it's about. Have you ever seen that movie Awakenings with Robin Williams and Robert De Niro?
It's like a dream.
It's not a dream. It's like at least Robin Williams is a doctor, and
Patch Adams.
But the Robert De Niro character is like a boy that gets diagnosed with polio, I think, when he's at a really young age. And through medicines that the Robin Williams character is developing, gives it to the Robert De Niro character, and it brings this person back to life essentially. But it only lasts a certain amount of time. It makes him like really smart and really attentive, and it just totally turns him into a human again. But then over time, that medicine starts to wear off, and he just goes back into his original state of being in almost like in a coma. Flowers for Algernon was a similar type of story where this person who's writing a diary, like the book is a diary, and he's you can tell the way, like his level of intelligence based on the way he's writing in the beginning of the book through certain medicines, and through his experiences, you see that he gets a lot smarter, but then the same kind of thing happens where he starts to fade back away, and it's a really sad story. But
nice.
But and then
I'll take that recommendation because I'm always.
I believe, from what I remember, it's a short story.
I'm not familiar.
And I may not be doing it justice by the way I'm explaining it because it's been so long since I've read it.
It's such a cool idea.
Yeah. But if you're gonna see, and I think Flowers for Algernon, it was I remember in my time as a child, that story having a lot of impact, as well as an occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, which is also a short story. And it's more of like a dreamlike story, but yeah, I can provide you with links to those at some point.
Hey, we'll put them in the show notes.
Sure.
We've got show notes. Do you have any other mediums that have had a similar impact as those books? Like, are you more into movies, or is there any movie or anything else?
Yeah, I'm a real '90s film buff. So
Dune.
I think Dune, not so much actually. No, I think for me it comes down to Forrest Gump,
nice.
Braveheart, Shawshank Redemption, Lean on Me. I mean, like true '90s films. Back to the Future. There's just so much, like, when it comes down to the screenwriting and the visual, the visual foreshadowing and all the things that go into it. like movies were totally my thing, and that like I said, I wanted to be a director when I was younger. Back to the Future, I think the first Mission Impossible was a really for me a fantastic film.
What makes a good film in your mind?
For me, what makes a good film is something that really makes you think. So, and makes you have to feel like you have to look back at what you just saw, right? So, Memento is a really good one. Yeah, where you kind of have to like piece it all back together. I actually really like Inception. I think that's it's a bit more actiony than what I like. Batman Begins, even I think is a great movie. It really takes these elements that made the comic and brought it into a more realistic light. But yeah, movies were really my thing, and 90s music probably.
I got a soft spot myself.
Yeah,
we're just at that age. I think
I'm still a big Foo Fighters, Nirvana.
It's my wife's favorite band. We've seen them a bunch of times.
Smashing Pumpkins. I can't get past like how good they are.
I'm with you. All right, next quick fire question. What's the single most useful thing that you carry around with yourself besides your phone or tablet?
My glasses. I think those are the one thing I can't live without. I can't live without my glasses. I mean, I wear contacts every once in a while, but I need my glasses to see.
Nice. If you had a time machine and you could go back and meet your 10-year younger self, what advice would you give? So put yourself 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
What advice would have really helped you?
Meet more people. I feel like I've compensated for that probably over time. Like I feel like I've worked on that. But yeah, meet more people early on. Eat healthier.
That's a good one.
And make exercise a part of your daily routine. I feel like being healthy and being active is an extremely important part of living. Being a good example to your children, because as I grew up, my parents didn't exercise, or my father in particular was really overweight, and as I was growing up wanting to do a lot of different things, he wouldn't be able to do these things with me, right? Like go hiking up a mountain, for example, like even something like Mount Nittany, pretty straightforward thing. My hope is to still be able to go for a jog with my kids when they're 18 or 20, because we should be good examples in that way. We should lead by example. And I think that's, for the kind of work that I do, it's easy to fall out of that habit, and it's easy to be complacent. But if you can get healthier and be more active earlier in life, it's going to have these long-term benefits. I wish that, personally, I wish that I had started CrossFit 10 years ago rather than 6 years ago, because if I had done that, I would be in much better shape, and I think a lot healthier than I even am now. I feel like I'm relatively good shape, and I feel like I'm healthy, but I wish I had started it sooner. I wish I had done it sooner. What else would I tell myself? Read more. Read more. Spend more time with family, and don't work too hard. I don't know. I think working hard is important, but I think you have to balance it. And I think if you can't find that balance earlier on in life, it's going to be harder to find that balance later in life. So,
well, I think that's a good place to end it.
Yeah,
that was great. Well, thanks.
Thank you. It's fun to do this.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Well, that's that. My conversation with Bien Concepcion. Sitting down with him was really interesting. When I went to edit this thing, unlike some of my other guests, it didn't take very long at all. I didn't have to take out as many ums, ahs, bees, bahs. It just goes to show you how thoughtful this guy is. He's a one-take master. Just sit down, spit out very concise and precise information that's actionable. I hope everyone enjoyed this one. I hope you found some value in here. Make sure to check out the show notes for all the stuff we referenced, and we will see you next time on Design Approach.